What's going on, guys? Hope y'all are having a good one. Now that we've covered progressive overload more as a abstract concept in the first two videos, I want to start going into more concrete examples of what that actually looks like in a training log, which you should have one if you are into lifting weights. It's kind of the only way to not make sure that you spin your wheels. But anyways, the most fundamental version of progressive overload is going to focus on the most fundamental variable in your training, that being the weight you're using on the exercise. You have to lift within a certain rep range to get anything out of an exercise. And by anything, I'm mainly talking about strength and muscle gain, which is about the 5 to 30 rep range. And it makes sense that to get within that rep range and to get a sufficiently challenging stimulus, you have to use a certain amount of weight on the bar. Well, that is the most fundamental variable in your training, and the most fundamental version of progressive overload, the simplest, is a linear progression, where we are looking to keep our sets and our reps the same each workout. The only thing we're changing is adding weight. And in my own training history, there are 3 instances where I have used a linear progression. That would be when I was a beginner. That would be in instances where I was rehabbing myself. And I've also used it as kind of a great value version of block periodization. Block periodization is where you just start an exercise out at really high reps and you add weight each week, expecting, or at least allowing yourself, the liberty of losing reps as it allows you to continue to add weight. So let's go over the first one, when I was a beginner. When you are new to lifting, like I mentioned in the last video, that diagram that showed the stimulus, recovery, and adaptation model, well, when you are a newbie, that recovery and adaptation occurs very quickly than when you're already adept to lifting. And because of that, you can often add weight at a much faster rate than someone who has been into lifting for a year or 2 years, etc. Because of that, you're able to have something in your progression that looks like this. I'm gonna have to get a bigger whiteboard at some point because this is gonna be ass. But see here at week 1, we have a 5x5 on the bench press with 95 pounds. It's not unrealistic for someone who's new to lifting to be able to add 15 to 20 pounds to their working sets on bench in a month and keep that up for a couple months. Another reason for that is because, going back to that model, stimulus, recovery, adaptation, a lot of new lifters are inhibited by their ability to exert force through their body because they don't have that mind-muscle connection. You know, you ask a new guy in the gym to squeeze his lat, someone who's like day 1 beginner, they're not gonna know what the hell that means. It's those kinds of things that keeps them from taxing their body to their utmost capabilities because they're limited not by muscular endurance or pain tolerance, or actually it might be pain tolerance, but they're also limited by skill. So that is one instance where linear progression is viable. You can have someone start on that for a couple weeks / months until they hit a point where they start dropping reps, and then you might progress them on to a double or dynamic double progression, which are 2 things that I'll talk about in my next video. The next instance where I have used linear progression in my own training is in any instance where I've had to rehab myself and it wasn't a legitimate injury. Now, what I followed was Barbell Medicine's and Alan Thrall's protocol on their respective channels. If you want to look into that, go check out their channels. I'm not going to go very in-depth on what I did. I'm just going to talk about what I did in the gym and what that was. So, this particular incident, I tweaked my back squatting 405, and I knew something was wrong. I gave it like 5 minutes, and I was like, okay, I'll just wait it out, see how this feels. When it came time to put the bar back on my back, it wasn't there, dude. It just wasn't. My back was all knotted up. It was fiery hot. On the drive home, I was having like 8 out of 10 pain, and I was able to rehab myself back to pain-free squatting within 2 weeks. And all I did in the gym was I took the movement and I regressed it to a point to where I wasn't experiencing pain more than like a 3 out of 10. and I just added weight, barring that I did not increase that pain threshold. I was kind of capping myself at a 3 out of 10 discomfort level. So what that looked like was box squats. I couldn't go to depth because that would cause too much pain. So I started with box squats, and I just started with the bar the first day. And because the bar is such light weight for me, because at the time I could squat 405, that's 10% of my 1 rep max. I don't really need 2-3 days or a week of recovery before I can come back and improve upon that. So my frequency was daily running a protocol like this. And I would just add 10 or even 5 pounds, basically a smallish jump, going for a bigger one, barring that I didn't increase the pain threshold. And I would do that until I got to, say, 135 or so. I know I didn't write that far out. And once I got to a point to where I was box squatting a decentish weight, and I knew that I could then progress the exercise to a free squat, I would do that, and I would start the movement over to a point to where I didn't exceed that 3 out of 10 pain threshold. So you would just go from box squatting after a week or two to then squatting, and then just progress that until you get to your normal working set weight, and then you're good to go. You have rehabbed yourself. The third instance is something I tried for the first time in my training a few months ago. Just something I did for fun with an exercise, and it's like diet or great value block periodization. I know I already explained that in the intro, but this was actually something I pulled from my training log. I went back and wrote it down just so I could have it on the whiteboard here. But what I did was I took a compound movement, the barbell bent over row, and I started out with 2 sets in the 15 to 20 rep range. And I found that day 95 pounds was enough weight to keep me in that rep range. And then I just started adding weight as I could. Let's see. Week 1 was 95 pounds for 2 sets of 18. Week 2, I got 2 sets of 16 with 105 pounds. Week 3, I got 2 sets of 15 with 115 pounds. And this next part is what makes it more like block periodization, because I then stuck with that same weight until I got back up to 20 reps. So I stayed at 115 for 3 weeks. And then I bumped the weight up 20 pounds because I had made it up to the upper echelon of the 15 to 20 rep range. And when I bumped the weight up to 135, which was a 20-pound jump, my reps dropped down to 14 for the first set and 12 for the second. So I stuck with 135 for another 3 weeks until I got to 20 on my first set and 14 for my second set. And that warranted another weight jump, so I went to 145 and I got 16 and 14. And I then bumped up to 155 for 14 and 9. You see, in a 10-week span, I went from doing 36 total reps with 95 pounds to 23 total reps, 155 pounds. That's not that much of a difference in workload. Another 2 weeks or so, and I would have been pretty close to that 36 total rep mark again. And as you can see, I was giving myself the liberty of losing reps in the name of adding weight. Now, this isn't technically like a strict linear progression. It's kind of a double progression too. But I give you that example to illustrate that you don't have to follow the incredibly strict definition of these progression models. I've looked at a couple strength training programs now, and a lot of them just combine all these different progression models into its own little Frankenstein. And honestly, as long as you're finding a way to do more work or more weight, and it's something that you can sustain, you've got a good progression model. Yeah, that's all I have to say on linear progression today, guys. It's going to be something that you utilize when you can expect fast progression to occur, like when you're a newbie, when you're detrained per se, when you're rehabbing yourself, or whenever you allow for yourself to have that room to add weight, like I did with the barbell bent over row, starting out with higher reps and moving down to lower rep ranges. Next time, I'm going to start talking about some of the more generally applicable progression models, like double progression and dynamic double progression. And then after that, I want to talk about another progression model I started using called the rep goal system that I've really been enjoying. That's it, fellas. Y'all have a good one.